जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन हीरावनचारि हीरावनचारि राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन यमुना तीरावनचारि तीरावनचारि राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा गिरिधरि राधा गिरिधरि राधा जय राधा गिरिधरि राधा गिरिधरि राधा जय जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेव जय सुभद्रा जय जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेव जय सुभद्रा जय गौरीताय 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 प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय श्रीपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामचार्य शिलारिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा गिरधारी भगवान की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्र मैया की जय। श्री श्री गौर निताई की जय। निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Gurudev. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayatu Dhirayet नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवते उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So Hare Krishna everybody, and welcome to our session of evening Srimad Bhagavatam Katha. So we were discussing the various pastimes of Bharat Maharaj. So just a quick recap. We covered two sessions on Bharat Maharaj's story. The first session was focused on Bharat Maharaj, on how he actually left his family, his kingdom, and he came to the forest to pursue and intensify his devotional service and practice severe austerities. While in the forest, he was somehow he saw a baby deer born in front of him and the mother die, and he developed a natural compassion and affection for the baby deer, so much so that slowly it became an impediment, or it was a distraction to his sadhana and to his regular worship and practice of devotional service. And like this, when death came, he was completely unaware, or it caught him unawares. And at that point, he couldn't see the baby deer and was constantly thinking about its welfare and hoping that the deer would be fine. And in that state of thinking about the deer, he gave up his body. And in the next life, he took the body of a deer. But Krishna never forgets the devotional service done by his devotees. So Krishna gave him the body of a deer, but gave him the remembrance of his past life, which is not possible for any embodied living entity. As a deer, we saw last time how he went back to the same ashram of Pulastha Muni and Pulaha Muni. And there he was associating with the sages, hearing Krishna Katha, being part of the worship, and eating and living very frugally and awaiting death. And at the end of that particular life, when death did come, he was practicing devotional service, thinking about the Lord. And so, in the next birth, from the deer's birth, he didn't go back to Godhead, but he got the body of a Brahmana. So he was born as a son of a Brahmana in a very pious Brahmana's family, very affectionate. So this particular Brahmana, he had a special affection for his son, this Jada Bharat. Although he was a son of his second wife, who had twins, and the first wife, from the first wife, the Brahmana had 9 sons. So the other 9 sons, they were generally karmakandis, worshippers of, they did their normal Vedic sacrifices and worship. But Jada Bharat, from the very beginning, was completely absorbed in devotional service. And as we discussed last time, He was extremely repentant. So he was given another chance, and he knew that the only way that he can take this opportunity and make the most out of it is to sincerely repent and not get attracted or allured by any material distraction whatsoever. So, to achieve his goal, he behaved externally like a madman. Internally, he was completely absorbed in Krishna. But externally, he used to portray as if he's somebody who's lazy, who is dumb-headed, and who cannot understand even basic instructions. So while his father was very affectionate, wanted to teach him the shastras and make him prepare him for the grihastha life, but Jada Bharat purposefully did not follow the instructions properly, and he was given many instructions, many things to be done for normal, purification and worship of the Lord, but he chose exactly to do the opposite of what he was told. He even did not learn the Gayatri, although his father tried to teach him many, many times. So, although the father was not successful, still because of his affection, he was hoping that his son would one day learn and be able to practice the Vedic rituals that he has taught him, or he's trying to teach him. And in that particular, while he was doing these and thinking about this, death came along and took away the Brahmana. So Jada Bharat at that point was fatherless. And then Bhagavatam tells us that his younger wife, the Brahmana's younger wife, she gave up uh, the two twins, her children, boy and a girl. She gave the responsibility of raising them up to the elder wife, and she joined the Brahmana and became Sati. She gave up her life voluntarily. So now Jada Bharat and his sister were looked after by the elder wife and the 9 sons of that particular Brahmana. So these 9 step-brothers, they considered him to be a very fool, dull person who's like brainless. So although they were followers of Karma Kanda, they could not appreciate or recognize Jada Bharat as a very, very pakka devotee, a determined devotee. So they could not appreciate him. So Jada Bharat continued to behave like a madman, like he was doing from before, even when his father was present in the planet. So his brothers, knowing that he just doesn't understand things and he's just lazy, he's just we can just treat him any way you want. So when they started getting that feeling, they started mistreating him. And looking at the brothers, all the others also started mistreating Jada Bharat. But one thing to note, Jada Bharat, although he was obviously being mistreated, he was being ridiculed, he never protested. He never opened his mouth to defend himself or to explain to them that actually he was not bad as they are thinking him to be so, but he's completely absorbed in the Supreme Lord. He never wanted to do that. So it's a good lesson from here that we learn is sometimes when we are trying to progress in our Krishna consciousness journey, trying to chant nicely, trying to read the books nicely, trying to be absorbed in Krishna whenever we have the opportunity. A lot of people around us, more specifically our own, sometimes our family members, sometimes our very close friends, sometimes our relatives, they tend to ridicule us. They make fun, or they deliberately, say words that will either hurt us or pierce us. Now, normally in this material world, we always try to counteract such things. When somebody says something bad or some ridicules you, you are always, we always feel, oh my God, I need to prove myself. So in this material world, everybody is trying to prove themselves. Everybody is trying to protest if something wrong is being said against them. But the real way to react is what? No reaction. So no reaction is the best reaction. So Jada Bharat actually teaches this by his own example, whereby he doesn't protest at all. Because Krishna is in his heart. Even if he was to tell them, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't appreciate that. Moreover, he didn't want to get into any either argument or any kind of attachment or a detachment from their detachment from duty, that is, towards his family. So he just did his duty as much as he was required to do, and he kept himself aloof from all these things. Never talking, never protesting, never making his stand clear, or to perhaps clear any misconceptions that he thought his brothers might have. So it's a good lesson for us. It's not easy to just keep our mouths shut when we think we can open it and prove that the other person is wrong. Because we forget at the end of the day, Krishna is in control. If the other person has to misunderstand us, even after hundreds of explanations, nothing will happen. And when the time is right, then even without opening our mouths, the other person automatically reciprocates and appreciates what we are doing. So our job is to engage in devotional service and leave the rest to Krishna. And this is a very good example that Jada Bharat is actually showing us. So what he did is he never worked or he never proved anything to anybody. So we hear that Jada Bharat actually was a very muscular person, very, very strong, very stout. Perhaps if he was to face 8 or 9 people together and fight them out, he could have single-handedly beaten or defeated all of them. But he chose not to display such powers, neither physical nor mental. So whatever he got out of its own accord, whatever the brothers gave him, he took. So he just did whatever was told to him in terms of work, and he asked, sometimes used to beg for a little bit of food, and whatever they felt like they gave him. Even though sometimes it was tasteless or putrid, or it's not really very palatable. When such food was there, the brothers, they chose to give it to Jada Bharat. But Jada Bharat again never complained. So he also did not bother to look after his own body. He used to keep himself very disheveled. The clothes that he used to wear, he never even bothered to clothe himself, apart from the minimum, maybe just a loincloth. So they were very dirty, never bothered washing them. He lay on the ground, and so much so, Bhagavatam says, even his sacred thread, the Brahman thread, that also became just black in color. So knowing the situation of Jada Bharat and the fact that whatever you give him, he accepts without any protest. So they even started taking even more advantage. So they made him labor hard, very hard in the fields. So whatever was very hard work and they didn't want to do, they told him to do. And Jada Bharat, whatever he was told to do, he did without any protest. So whatever work he did, in exchange for that, the brothers used to give him some broken rice, some stale food, whatever they couldn't consume or they didn't want to consume because it was substandard. They gave it to Jada Bharat, like how we give to the birds sometimes. They used to just treat Jada Bharat like giving the leftover, unnecessary, unfit for human consumption food to Jada Bharat. Still, he didn't complain. Moreover, Jada Bharat didn't even have any grudge. So sometimes, as devotees, when we try to follow these instructions and say, well, okay, no reaction is the best reaction. But sometimes, once it happens like that, we try and not talk and keep quiet and, things move on. When it happens again, we try and do it again, not speak, try to follow Bhagavatam. But when it happens again and again and again, then we become restless. And then we start at least in our mind, complaining to Krishna and telling him, why me? When I've been following instructions and you've been consistently putting me through these difficult situations. And slowly, if we are not careful, we actually start holding grudges against people, against Krishna. And then that becomes detrimental again to our spiritual progress without our even knowing them consciously. So Jada Bharat, he was very careful. He never bore any grudges against his brothers or anybody who was treating him in that particular way. So Jada Bharat used to work hard in the fields, and sometimes at night he was told to sit on a big haystack or some place which is high up in the fields so that he could keep a watch at night so there's no wild animals can come and eat away the crops and the grains. So one day while he was sitting on such an elevated place, he saw a group of people approaching him. So in the nearby place there was a dacoit leader, and he had this desire to have a son so that he can have a descendant. So he was not getting a son, although he wanted a son. So he wanted to offer a special sacrifice to Bhadrakali. And for that particular sacrifice, he needed a very dull, stout kind of person who he could sacrifice and offer the man's head or blood, should we say, to Bhadrakali to please her so that she can bestow him with a son. With that intent in mind, he actually was successful in capturing a person just like that and brought him to be sacrificed. But somehow or the other, this man, while others were a bit distracted, he ran away. And when he ran away, the dacoit leader was furious. What's going to happen to my sacrifice? So he ordered his men to immediately go and search out for him and bring him back by whatever means. So these dacoits, they started looking for him here and there, went onto the fields, and finally they were completely disappointed. They couldn't see anybody there. It was dark. And then they came to this place. They just chanced upon this place where they saw Jada Bharat sitting. And so they slowly closed in on him, and somehow or the other they captured him. And they bound him with ropes. And they brought him forcefully to this temple of Bhadrakali. Now, something to note, as we mentioned earlier, is Jada Bharat was a very powerful, very strong person physically, and he could have easily resisted, and not only resisted but defeated all the dacoits that had come to capture him. But again, he chose no reaction. Is the best reaction. So he did not say anything. He did not open his mouth. He did not show his physical powers. Whatever they wanted him to do, he just complied. Did not protest. Why? Simply he depended on the Lord. If Krishna wants this to happen to me, so be it. It's a very, very advanced level of surrender. There are different levels of surrender. So this is an advanced level of surrender where the living entity does not have anything on his own, his or her own. He or she is completely dependent on Krishna. Whatever situation Krishna puts them in, they joyfully accept. Even if it is bad, even if it is something that will kind of kill their bodies. If they have to even get killed, they will not protest. It's very difficult to understand and very difficult to comprehend that level of surrender. But Bhagavatam gives us a glimpse of what it actually means. And something to note is Jada Bharat did not protest, did not hold grudges, did not do anything. But somebody might say, oh my God, he was like, he was thinking, I shouldn't protest. But he actually, from internally, he wanted to protest, but he was just forcing himself not to. Now, that is not the case. Even internally, Jada Bharat was always absorbed in the Supreme Lord. So even when the dacoits were taking him, and obviously Jada Bharat knew, if dacoits are capturing him, they're not going to just capture him for fun. They're definitely going to do some harm to him. So although he knew that situation, he chose not to react. Why? He just depended on Krishna. And if Krishna wants me to die, so be it. But internally, he was, even at that point, he was absorbed in Krishna. He was absorbed in thinking about Krishna. So although externally they were taking his body for sacrifice, internally he was no different from when he was in his own house with his brothers. So his internal consciousness was exactly the same, although externally his body was in great danger. What happened after that? So the dacoit leader, he was, they had obviously planned a very elaborate ritual, which was obviously concocted. So this story, we will, as we discuss, will tell us what happens if the demigods are not worshipped properly. What happens if a person harms or tries to harm a devotee of the Lord, even with the intent of pleasing demigods? What is a reaction to such an event? So they got him to the temple of Kali, and in Hindi there is a word, Bali ka bakra. So when Bali means sacrifice and bakra means a goat. So when a goat is taken for sacrifice, it is fed well, decorated very nicely, and the goat feels, oh my God, these people are taking care of me so nicely. Wow, they're great people. But little does the goat realize that all these goodies are being given to him with the sole intent of what? To take his life. Goat is unaware. So this term Balika Bakra comes from the fact that when somebody is about to be killed, he's given all the goodies just to distract him and make him feel nice before he is forced to give up his life. So similarly, he was given new clothes. He was decorated with ornaments, with garlands, with sandalwood paste. Yeah, and they brought him before the deity of Bhadrakali, and they started worshipping Kali with incense, with lamps, with flowers, fruits. They were singing songs in her glorification and dancing. And ultimately, Jada Bharat was made to sit down in front of the deity. And then the chief priest, he came with his sword, and he took up the sword, started chanting some mantras with the intent that once the sword goes up, and then he chants the mantras and the head goes. And Bhagavatam says, it's a bit gross, but Bhagavatam says that the intent was to offer Jada Bharat's blood as a liquor offering to Bhadrakali. So as soon as this person chanted, he raised his sword, chanted his mantras, and as he was about to get his sword down to sever Jada Bharat's head, what happened? There was this huge roaring sound, and the deity of Bhadrakali, who they were worshipping, the deity actually burst open. And Kali herself personally emerged from the deity, from the altar, and came down. She was extremely angry, infuriated that how can a devotee of the Lord be treated like this, who's completely absorbed in her master. So Kali was furious. She came down the altar, grabbed hold of the sword, caught hold of all these dacoits, and with the same sword that was meant to kill Jada Bharat, she took the sword and actually chopped off all the heads of all the dacoits that were present. She did not even leave one. Then she, along with her associates, drank that blood, danced wildly, and it is said, Bhagavatam says that with the cut heads, the Kali was actually playing with these heads just as a child plays with balls, like cricket balls or something like that. So this is the result of somebody who does not know how to worship the devatas, more so who offends a pure devotee of the Lord in the name of worshipping a demigod or a devata. So this is a very, very important lesson for us to learn, that devatas can never be pleased by offending a devotee. And if somebody takes it to this extreme of killing a devotee, then this is what happens. They were actually, all these dacoits were trying to please Kali. But what was the result? They themselves got killed. So sometimes people think that, oh, I should do this just to please the Lord, or just to please this particular devata or demigod. And because they do not follow the actual Vedic injunctions, they just buy maybe some book here and there. They might have heard from family, from some relative, from some mami, some mosa, or somebody saying that you should do this, this, this. They try and follow that instruction, little realizing the nature, or understanding how bona fide that instruction is. So this again brings us to the point that whatever we do in our worship, in our service, in our attraction to the Supreme Lord, or any Devata for that matter, it has to be done in a bona fide way. If not, it is completely useless. What to talk about Devatas, even worship of the Supreme Lord, as we understand, has to be done under proper bona fide guidance. And that's why the presence of Srila Prabhupada in our life is very important. We are extremely fortunate that we have somehow got the access to his books, to his instructions, to his message, and to the authentic Vedic literatures that teach us how to systematically progress in our own spiritual life while keeping other worshippers and other followers in the right perspective without offending them. So after the dacoits were killed, Jada Bharat was still absorbed completely. The fact that such a violent and incident happened in front of his own eyes did not affect him. He was still absorbed in the Lord, and he was completely callous to something that these things that were happening around him. And at that point of time, obviously, after all this was done, he left the place. And while he was traveling, he came across a wonderful personality. A wonderful personality. The personality at that point of time was obviously completely infested with false ego. But over a period of time, after interacting with Jada Bharat, this person actually realized who Jada Bharat is, and he also realized the nature of the instructions Jada Bharat gave him, and he started his own spiritual journey. This personality was Maharaj Rahuguna. So he was the king of a place called Sindhu and Sauvira province, and he was traveling in a very nice palanquin to Kapil Ashram. So while he was traveling, he came to this river Ikshumati, and at that point of time, he thought that the palanquin is not being carried properly, so he needs another able-bodied, some stout palanquin carrier. So he told his other carriers to start looking, whoever is they can find on the way. He's the king, so just check whoever you find and get them to do some service for the king. It's a king's palanquin. So while they were traveling, they came across Jada Bharat. And when they saw Jada Bharat, immediately the palanquin carriers, they told him, hey. And Jada Bharat, whether he's told to do service, or whether he's given bad things, or whether he's been ridiculed, or he's been taken to death, what was his reaction? No reaction is the best reaction. So same thing, the palanquin carriers told him, join, he joined. So they just saw that, oh, he's so strong, he's so muscular, he's perfect for the job. And so they basically forced him to come and carry the palanquin. So Jada Bharat was carrying the palanquin along with the other carriers, and after some time, suddenly the other palanquin carriers, they found that when they were carrying the palanquin nicely, but somehow they found that they were like jolted, suddenly, and they didn't know what's going on, and even the king inside was a bit disturbed. And then they saw that Jada Bharat, he was compassionate to every living entity. So while taking the palanquin on the roads, he could see some ants going across. And he even unknowingly did not want to step on those ants. So to avoid the ants, like, imagine somebody is traveling, going along their own pace, and suddenly when you stop, it's like a brake. So suddenly car is going, and suddenly if you apply the brakes, what happens? Stop. So he saw these ants and he stopped himself. And when he stopped himself, there was this big jolt. And all the other palanquin carriers, they also had to stop. So the king, he was very disturbed. And he warned this Jadabhar, the palanquin carriers, because he didn't know who's doing that and why it is happening. So he basically said, who is it that is carrying this palanquin so unevenly? You should be more careful and carry it properly. So the bearers, the palanquin bearers, they obviously became very afraid because the king is angry. So they said that, oh no, king, we are actually not negligent, but this new man who has just joined us, he is not able to take this palanquin efficiently, and he's not able to carry it swiftly. So it's him, not us. Obviously, they were Shudras, palanquin carriers, and they were not really worried about some ants here and there, whereas they got the association of a Vaishnav, and the Vaishnav is compassionate. So it is said that a Vaishnav can never be compatible with other people in this material world, but a Vaishnav interacts with other people in this material world with the intent of giving them devotional service, of glorifying the Supreme Lord. So it was an incompatible situation. So after this had happened, Raghuguna basically he said in a bit of a sarcastic tone, being angry. So he addressed Jada Bharat and said that, oh, you appear to be very fatigued due to your age and your frail body. You might be troubled by work. Are others not cooperating with you? He was very sarcastic, extremely sarcastic. So even after hearing the sarcastic words, Jada Bharat was not affected. No reaction is the best reaction. So he remained silent and he continued to carry the palanquin. But then again, while going along the roads, there was, obviously ants keep coming. There might be other, lizards or some other living entities that keep coming. So every time he was about to step over such living entities, he put his brakes. And again, there was a jolt. And when there was a jolt again, even though the king warned him, he did not listen. So this time, Maharaj Rahuguna was extremely furious. He said, you rascal, don't you know that I am the master? You have the audacity to disregard my instructions? I can punish you just like Yamaraj. If you don't come to your senses, I will get you punished and killed. So it was very harsh words on Jada Bharat. How did Jada Bharat react? No reaction is the best reaction. But in this instance, after Maharaj Rahuguna was extremely angry and infuriated, Jada Bharat, what did he do? He did react. But how did he react? We'll see. Next week, same day, same time. What did Jada Bharat do after being scolded at and threatened by Maharaj Rahuguna? So quickly, few lessons from today's session. So first lesson that we can see today is that once we become attached or we become completely determined in pursuing our spiritual life, in undertaking our spiritual journey very, very seriously with full determination, when we have that strong urge, that strong desire, automatically other things in this material world become tasteless. So we become indifferent. So when somebody is progressing spiritually and is determined to progress spiritually, even though they might be performing their duties in this material world, it is a natural reaction that they become indifferent. They are not really concerned, or they don't get too much involved with unnecessary material things. So just like Jada Bharat was indifferent, even a devotee who may be still part in the Grihastha ashram, he might be owning things, he might be having many things, but internally he is detached. He has nothing to do or has nothing to react to in this material world. Second is the second lesson, that it is a duty of the father to educate the children, even though the children might appear to be unqualified. And however difficult it might be for the father to make them qualified, the father never gives up. The father has to constantly try and educate and do his duty, educate his children and do his duty. So the father should always do his duty and never give up in any circumstances. That's the second one. Third, we should prepare for our death. If we don't prepare for our death, the death will get hold of us. Death will not forget us. So third lesson, we can forget death, but death will not forget us. So we should keep that aspect in mind and plan our current life and our future accordingly and prioritize our activities. Fourth lesson, the last lesson for this section, is how do you know that we are actually making advancement in spiritual life, in our spiritual journey? So a test of advancement is the level of dependence or surrender we have on the Supreme Lord. Our level of surrender towards the Supreme Lord will determine our level of advancement. And how do you know whether we are surrendered or not? The only way we can know that is when we are faced with challenging situations, when we are faced with challenging people around us. Do we react or do we accept that as the will of the Lord? If it is up to us. So 4 lessons. First, if we want to progress spiritually, we become indifferent towards material activities and material things. Number 2, the duty of the father is to educate the children, no matter how difficult it might be. Third, we should prepare for death and not forget death. Otherwise, death will never forget us. Third, the test of advancement is how surrendered we are to the Supreme Lord. And the test of how surrendered we are to the Supreme Lord depends on how we react to things or people that is taking place or that is happening around us. Specifically, when the environment or the situation is not in our favor. When we are wronged against, how do we react? Do we become agitated? And if we do, it shows how progress or how much progress we have actually made spiritually. So 4 lessons from today's session will continue next week. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.